Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Samfiru Tumarkin live employment law show on Facebook and I believe YouTube as well. So my name is Sandy Chen. I'm an employment lawyer at our Vancouver office. Our firm has offices in Toronto, in Calgary, and in Vancouver. So I know some people here will be from out of province. I'm here for the next 29 minutes to answer any and all questions to do with employment law, which, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is very exciting these days. Lots of things happening with the fourth wave hitting us, with COVID, with vaccinations. If you have any questions about any of that stuff or anything else, so if you've been offered a severance package or you're going through some issues at work, please feel free to put it in this comment box here. So if you type it in, I can see whatever you want to ask on this text box to my right here. So feel free to fire away, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. A lot of issues we are dealing with nowadays have to do with vaccination policies at work. And so, we've seen quite a number of employers, from ranging from, manufacturing plants or, law firms implementing these vaccination policies. As I'm sure, most people here will know, in BC, our provincial government has made it mandatory for healthcare workers, all healthcare workers, excuse me, which I believe is probably around 100,000 people in BC. It's made the vaccine mandatory for all of them, effective. I think coming up at the end of this month, end of October, I believe. I think it's October 25th or 26th. So it's obviously it's impacting a lot of people. I'm sure most companies will have something to say about it. So any questions about that or any issues at work, please feel free to type her in here, and I'll do my best to answer. Thanks, Laura. Yes, October 26th. Okay, so I see a few questions here on the text box. So Shelly Last asks, my company is asking me to disclose my vaccination status and having to be vaccinated by October 24th. Is this legal? So Shelly, and guys, you're going to hear me say a lot of this today, but I'm going to apologize in advance, but the vaccination stuff really depends, right? Like if you're in a long-term care home, the provincial government has said you have to disclose and you have to get vaccinated, right? Or if you're a healthcare worker at the end of this month. If you're in an office environment and you sit in a separate office, or if you're working from home remotely, the company, I don't see any basis for them to get your vaccination status or making you take the vaccine. So, it's always I'm going to say it depends a lot today, but I hope that gives you a general overview. So Shelly, I'm sorry I can't answer your question. If you let me know where you work or what your position is, please, I can try to maybe, narrow down my answer for you. Mark asks, can my employer make me pay for the rapid test if I'm not vaccinated? Mark, no, that's a business cost that they're going to have to incur. I know that some employers are, I think, trying this. The only situation where I can see that happening maybe is if in your employment contract it says that you have to get the rapid test if you're not vaccinated. It's a condition of employment. But for most cases, Mark, they can't make you pay for them. I know some of them are fairly expensive. I heard there's these packs or these packages you can get now, which are fairly inexpensive. But in any case, no, you generally you don't have to pay for them. If they're saying you have to get them if you're not vaccinated. So Laura asks, what can healthcare workers do to keep their job? Good question, Laura. So you're probably, like most healthcare workers, in a union, or sorry, I shouldn't presume you're a healthcare worker, but let's say both let's say most healthcare workers are in a union, right? The nurses union is huge. And it's you're going to have to talk to your union about that. My understanding is they're going to put people on an unpaid leave, right? If you're not vaccinated. So you're not necessarily losing your job, but as a temporary measure, you're going to have to go on leave. If you're not in the union environment, as some healthcare workers may not be, it doesn't really matter. You can't really do anything to keep your job because you don't have that union protection, right? An employer can let you go for whatever reason they want. As long as it's not a discriminatory reason, like they're not being racist or sexist or, letting you go because of your disability. So Laura, to answer your question, it matters a lot whether you're in a union or not. I know the nurses union has come out and said they're not, let's put it, they're not enthused by the mandatory vaccination policy, because it's going to take, nurses out of some nurses, right? Most of the nurses aren't vaccinated, but it's going to take some nurses out of their jobs. So, and if you're not in a union, the only job protection I see for healthcare workers on a union is if they have some sort of exemption under the Human Rights Code. I'm sure that most of you have read about this. It's been written about quite a lot in the last 2 months, I would say. But the two main exemptions are religious and medical, right? The religious exemption is tricky. None of this stuff has really been litigated in front of a tribunal or a court. So it's terribly hard for, I think, any lawyer to predict what will happen with these exemptions. But they are valid grounds for you to say, hey, I can't get the vaccine because of my medical condition or because of my disability, or I can't get it for religious reasons. So for non-unionized employees, there is, some job protection if you have a medical or religious reason for not getting it. So Laura, I hope that answers your question. Healthcare workers, as you probably know, are mostly unionized. So talk to your union rep. As far as I can tell, they're just going to put everybody on leave that hasn't been vaccinated by as you said, October 26th. Shelly last asks, so Shelly, back to your original question. You work for a real estate developer and you're non-union. Yeah, Shelly, if you're in an office, or I don't know, if you're in an office job and it's difficult for them to say, give us your vaccination status, right? But Shelly, the bottom line is if you don't, they can just let you go if you're not in a union. They can just say to you, okay, Shelly, you're not going to get the vaccine. You're not going to tell us. Well, I guess the first one, Shelly, is if you don't tell them, they're going to assume you're not vaccinated, right? The main question in your case, Shelly, is do they have cause or not? And if you're in an office job, right, and you're not working close to anybody in close proximity, they're not going to have cause to let you go. You're going to be entitled to some severance pay. So I think the two main important points for you to take away, Shelly, is number one, they can let you go for really whatever reason, right? If you don't get the vaccine, they can just let you go, unless you have a medical or religious exemption. And the number 2 point is if they do let you go, if you're in an office environment and you're separated from everybody, I don't see how they can get away with not paying you severance. You're going to lose your job, but you're still going to be entitled to severance. Hopefully they don't let you go, but if a company is within its rights to let someone go because they haven't been vaccinated, unless that person has a valid exemption. So Deepak asks, what about a project manager in healthcare where you go to site very little and mostly work from home? That's a good question, Deepak. As far as I can tell, you have to be vaccinated to go to site, right? So I would say that if you can't do that part of your job, it's gonna be difficult. And I don't know who is your employer, Deepak. Like, is it a hospital or tell me who your employer is, and maybe we can explore that a bit more. But I'm not sure if the contents of the order have come out yet, Deepak. But but from reading the news and what they're planning on doing is they're going to the main rule is if you have to go on site, you have to be vaccinated. And if you can't do your job because of that, then you might have to be put on a leave. I don't know, but tell me who your employer is, and we can explore that a bit more. Blanca asks, can I apply for EI if my employer puts me on a leave of absence without pay? It depends. I mean, Blanca, tell me why they're putting you on a leave of absence. Like, did you? Is it a disciplinary measure? Is it having to do something with medical leave, or is it what happened there? Because typically you can get EI if you've been let go, obviously, or you can get medical EI if you're away from work due to sickness. If you're just on a leave of absence because of a disciplinary measure, and you're still employed, that's a harder case to get EI for. Okay, so Robbie asks, my husband's company gave him a 1-day unpaid suspension for asking questions about privacy issues and concerns about chemicals on the PCR test that they mandated for contractors at his work. Their HR said it doesn't break Canada Labor Code because it wasn't mandated on him. So Robbie, is your husband working for a federally regulated company, or is he a contractor at the site? So based on what you've just said there, Robbie, the 1-day unpaid suspension is problematic. I mean, just because you're asking questions doesn't give the employer a basis to suspend you. So that causes me some concern. I would say that they weren't legally allowed to do that if all he was doing was asking questions about his rights, right? If he's just asking questions about some privacy issues or what they're going to do with the data, the vaccination data or the testing data, I mean, those are fair questions, and it seems to me that he should not have been placed on an unpaid suspension or subject to any disciplinary measure. Okay. JD Sorensen asks, I have a nasal swab exemption from my doctor. They're telling me to go on sick leave. Yeah, JD, I mean, it depends on whether that's, an exemption for your nasal swab is based on a disability, right? If your doctor's saying you can't get it, then your employer has a duty to accommodate you with perhaps some other sort of test. So whether it's allowed or not, I think you have to make it clear to your employer that it's a medical exemption. You're entitled to your job, and the onus is on them to say why can't they give you some sort of other test. I mean, they could also say that you should just get vaccinated, but at the end of the day, I mean, if there's a medical reason you can't get vaccinated, that they have to accommodate that as well. I know it's very difficult. I know I think the College of Physicians in Ontario, or one of the provinces, just came out with a guideline saying, essentially telling doctors that there are very few exemptions to getting the COVID vaccine. I think their guideline to the doctors they regulate is essentially, it was if you had a bad reaction to the first vaccine, then you could get exempt to the second one, or if you have some sort of allergy that doesn't allow you to get it. But my understanding is a lot of the exemptions, they're very narrow that doctors are allowed to provide now. So Tina asks, we have to rapid test before flying out to work and then test every 72 hours. But we are told it is not on company time, so we have to do it before or after work. Then we have to pay for November and do it in 70 hours, 2 hours prior to going back to work again with negative results. So I just heard you say we shouldn't have to pay, but that is what we are told. Yeah, I mean, Tina, the tests, I don't know if you're unionized, Tina. If you're non-unionized, the tests are a business expense. You should not have to pay for them. It's one of those issues, Tina, where if you raise it, they might become upset and let you go. In that case, you'd be entitled to severance, right? And I get that it's probably hard to raise it. By the way, Tina, how much are you paying for the tests? Let me know and we can, but we can chat further. But no, you shouldn't have to pay for the COVID tests. Shelly lost. Their email is threatening me to terminate me if not vaccinated by November 1st. And they're assuming I'm not vaccinated because I won't tell them my status. Yeah, Shelly. So this just goes back to my earlier point. If they're entitled to terminate you if you're not in a union, right? The issue is if they have just cause or not. If and I think you were the one in an office environment. I'm fairly confident that if they do decide to let you go, it's going to be a without cause termination. You're going to be entitled to severance. Laura Yankov, religious exemption is ridiculous. They will deny it. Yeah, I mean, Laura, it's the religious exemption is a tricky one. Obviously, I mean, first of all, it has to be a sincere and genuine belief. What I've been telling, if someone comes to me and they, and they've been adhering to a certain religion for a long time, and they sincerely believe they can't get the vaccine, get a letter from their pastor, right, or get a letter from their religious leader. I think it's going to have to be litigated, Laura. I don't know to what extent the tribunal will permit the religious exemption. I'm just saying to you that it is a ground for people to validly deny it. It's going to come down to analysis of, is it reasonable for the employer to have to accommodate this person with a religious exemption, right? The legal term is it a, does the employer have to accommodate the employees to the point of undue hardship? So those questions are always so fact and context specific. Sitting here, it's almost impossible for me to, answer with any sort of certainty what will happen to someone claiming a religious exemption. So I take your point. You think it's ridiculous and they will deny it. But at the end of the day, it's not up to the employer. It's up to the Human Rights Tribunal. So we have a question from Jordan. How is the legal system handling dismissed employees who aren't getting the vaccine? How are they being treated by courts? The answer is, Jordan, as far as I know, there has not been a case because all this is so new, right? These mandatory vaccination policies really only came out probably 2 months ago, maybe a bit longer than that. Cases take, at least I would say right now, probably 8 months to a year at the very minimum to get to a judge. So as far as I'm aware, there's no cases that have really dealt with people who've been let go for refusing to get the vaccine. People in the unionized environment and the non-unionized environment will be treated differently, right? The union employees will be decided by an arbitrator. It's not going to go to a court. The non-union employees will go in front of a judge. I suspect sometime next year, we'll get some guidance from our courts. So I'm sorry I couldn't answer that one for you right now, but it will take time to go through the legal system here. JD Sorensen says religious exemption is legit. Harrison Chen says my pastor signed and approved my creed accommodation request. Can employers still deny? I work in an office not facing public. Yeah, that's a good question, Harrison. I think I tried to answer this earlier. To me, just based on those facts alone, I think they should be able to accommodate, particularly if you're in an office, right? You're not in like a long-term care home. You're not in like a meat processing plant. You have a letter from your pastor. My concern with the religious exemption is it's never really been dealt before in this context by the tribunal. There's certainly cases in the past where I believe, certain religions, you can't wear a hard hat on a safety site, cases like that. I mean, but those are, and I think, at the end of the day, I think the tribunal found that safety was more important than, or trumped the fact that certain religions needed to wear, a turban. So Harrison, I think your employer can still deny it, but if they do let you go, you certainly do have a case for discrimination on the basis of your religion in front of the Human Rights Tribunal. And what the Human Rights Tribunal can do is obviously award monetary compensation. They also have the power to get you your job back. So, yeah, Harrison, I mean, in your case, if you're in an office, I hope they just accommodate. It seems to me that that's a reasonable accommodation, right? Especially if it's not, if you're not at risk of in a high risk area. So Antonella Morrow asks, what does the infectious disease emergency leave under the ESA cover? I am told there's a protected leave. So Antonella, that's an Ontario question. I assume you're from Ontario. I can tell you, I'll try to refrain because I'm a BC lawyer, but I'll tell you that I know the leave has just been extended to January of next year. One of the purposes the government did it is to prevent employers from facing certain types of claims of constructive dismissal under the ESA. For our purposes, it's important for any Ontario people here. It's important to know that just because it says you can't claim for severance under the ESA doesn't mean you can't claim for severance at common law. Okay. A lot of people have been on the IDL leave since last March. So it's been like a year and a half in Ontario. The government's, I think, extended it a week or two ago to January. You don't necessarily have to wait until January to claim for severance. You can claim for that now under the common law, most likely. Now, before you do that, talk to a lawyer about whether it applies in your situation. So I think I'll leave it there, Antonella. I'm going to try to refrain from talking about Ontario law too much. Laura says in Alberta, they're rejecting all the religious exemptions. Laura, that might be the case. I'm not sure. I think it depends what you mean by they. Are you saying employers or are you saying the tribunal? I have not heard of the tribunals rejecting that, but again, I'm not from Alberta. My trucking Deepak asks, does a religious exemption need to be signed off by a priest? So Deepak, technically no. If you have a genuine, sincere belief that you can't get and it's because and as a nexus with your religion that you cannot get vaccinated, legally speaking, you don't need a note from your pastor or priest. It just would help a lot because your employer may not take, if you just say to them, I have a religious exemption, right? They may not take that seriously. If you get them a note, they might take that, obviously with more seriously and let you keep working without getting vaccinated. At the end of the day, Deepak, if they let you go, it's going to be the question in front of a tribunal. I would imagine that if a case like that goes to a hearing, you would need testimony from some sort of religious leader, right? Because that's highly relevant evidence in cases like that. Denise Phillips asked, "What is so special about this vaccine that has been forced on mankind?" I mean, these I'm going to try to stay out of the politics of the vaccination question. I will, if you have a question about what the law is, I can try to answer that, but I'll try to stay out of the policy or the political questions. Okay, Annabelle says, you just said something that contradicted Lior. Are you saying if you are an on-site, non-unionized worker and get fired for not getting, if you are a on-site, non-unionized worker and get fired for not getting vaccinated, it's a termination with cause? No, Annabelle, it's a termination without cause, right? It's unless they have unless you're going to the site every day, and so Lior might actually be talking about Ontario, Annabelle. Ontario, I don't know if they have mandated vaccines for healthcare workers. In BC, they have, right, as of October. So it's a different case in BC. If you're non-unionized and you have to go on site every day and you're not getting vaccinated, it's going to be a tougher argument. And the reason is, Annabelle, because the government has said you have to be vaccinated to get on site, in BC at least. So I'm not sure I'm necessarily contradicting the org. You might be talking about Ontario. It's at the end of the day, most companies, the government has not told them that their workers have to be vaccinated. In healthcare, in BC at least, it's different, right? Because the government has come in and made this order, or sorry, they're about to make this order. As of the end of October, you have to be vaccinated to go on site. Okay, Carmel Wen asks, how does one who is in a union go about retaining their job when employer demands vaccination? So Carmel, I can't answer that for you. Talk to your union rep about retaining your job. I'm not sure what union you're in, but talk to your union and see what they're gonna do. A lot of unions, aren't. I'm not, because your union will have to talk to management about whether a mandatory vaccination policy is reasonable. I know there's been at least one case from last year where I think the arbitrator did say that the vaccination, or it might have been masking, was reasonable. So it's going to come down to a question of whether the employer is exercising their management rights reasonably. Evelyn says it is not legal to ask for medical status. That's a constructive dismissal. So that's not necessarily true. It's, in some cases, it's legal to ask for vaccination status. The employer doesn't have a right to ask for your medical condition, right? But certainly in some cases, I can see that it would be reasonable for an employer to ask for a vaccination status, and that would not be I think you mean constructive dismissal. That would not be a constructive dismissal. So Denise says, and sorry, and guys, I'm sorry. There's a lot of questions that I'm not going to get to today. We're here again, I think twice a week for people in BC. My colleague Dan also does these, I believe, every other week. So if I can't get to all the questions today, please come to the next session. We also have a lot of materials on our websites, employmentlawyer.ca. There's a lot of articles, and it does address a lot of the questions that are being asked here. So if I can't get to yours, I do apologize, but I'll do my best to answer one or two more here. Todd Rutherham asks, does the charter protect your choice not to get vaccine? I mean, so Todd, I'm an employment lawyer. There's a lot of lawyers out there that do kind of charter litigation, constitutional litigation. There are certainly arguments for and against the COVID vaccine passports. I'll defer answering that question to someone who, obviously that does charter litigation, but I'll leave you with the, my thought is, there are certainly arguments on both sides, and, it might get litigated at some point. So does the charter protect your choice not to get vaccinated? It might, if you're talking about the vaccine passports. Oh yeah, so sorry, we've I think we're out of time for today. Again, I do apologize I wasn't able to get to everyone today. I think at the end of the day, people should keep in mind, because the biggest question is, if your employer lets you go, can they do that, and do they have to pay you severance, right? If you're in a union, talk to your union rep about it. As far as I know, the answer seems to be, for unionized employees, they're going to be put on an unpaid leave, right, on a temporary basis. For non-unionized employees, I think in general, I can say that if the government hasn't come in and said that your employer has to make your industry or has to make you get vaccinated, right? So in healthcare, the government has said that. But if the government hasn't told the employer to make sure their employees are vaccinated, it's very likely going to be a without cause termination, meaning you're going to be entitled to severance. So I hope that helps. Again, my colleague will be on, I believe, next week. We do have these for Ontario as well, and obviously everybody here probably knows Lior. He's on here, I believe, every other week. So I hope I hope everybody has a good weekend, and I'll be back in 2 weeks in case anybody wants to join me here again. Thanks.